more people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Anderson Cooper in Tel Aviv. We begin with breaking news here in the Middle East. Now, just over 24 hours after we first reported the U.S. attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, major questions remain. How effective were those strikes? Bomb damage assessments still being done. Did Iran move nuclear material prior to the attacks? And if so, where is it? And how will Iran choose to respond? Let's drill down on all of that over this next hour. Tonight, U.S. officials are working to assess the extent of damage caused by yesterday's massive targeted strikes. They caution it is too early to determine whether the country retains some nuclear capabilities. The B-2 bombers involved in what is being called Operation Midnight Hammer have now arrived back in the United States. The operation involved more than 125 aircraft, including some B-2 bombers, which acted as decoys, according to officials. Now, those bombers were reported to be moving west, possibly toward Guam. A CNN analysis of satellite images found the attack on Fordo left behind at least 6 large craters, likely caused by those bunker buster bombs called massive ordnance penetrators, which are designed to go deep underground before actually exploding. In central Iran, the country's largest nuclear complex, known as Isfahan, was struck with more than a dozen Tomahawk missiles fired by U.S. submarine. At least 18 destroyed or partially destroyed structures above ground could be seen in those images. According to one senior U.S. lawmaker, the key question now is whether Iran had moved any of its highly enriched uranium stockpiles from those facilities. Vice President J.D. Vance and other administration officials have tried to make clear today that regime change is not the objective of the Trump administration with this strike on Iran, but President Trump late today posted on social media saying if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? I'm here with CNN Jerusalem correspondent Jeremy Diamond and CNN's chief international correspondent Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, Iranians are at all levels of society trying to figure out what comes next. What have we seen so far?
So we have a number of different possible scenarios that we could be looking at. The anticipation is that Iran will respond. Its foreign minister has just said that they will have to respond. But the question is how. One possibility is that it uses its proxies. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. We know that obviously Hamas and Hezbollah have been severely degraded. I should just say that we're now hearing an alert, which is an indication that we...
Right. So these are the alerts that go out on all of our phones when you're in Israel. It's a 10-minute warning of incoming missiles or something incoming from Iran. So now the location we're in has a verbal alarm telling people to go down into bomb shelters. So we have about a 10-minute window to get down into a bomb shelter, and we'll continue to try to broadcast from that bomb shelter, and even if we can on the way down. Do you guys want to...
Should we go down, or you want to finish this?
Well, we should probably go down.
We should probably go down.
Let's just make sure. Do we have? Are we able to do that? Well, while they're just making sure we can get down there, let's talk about the Iranians' response.
So you've got the proxies as one response. You've got a direct attack from Iran on U.S. troops. That's what we saw after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. They hit Al Assad Air Base in Anbar province. Nobody was killed because they kind of had signaled in advance that they were going to do it, but nonetheless, it was the biggest ballistic missile strike on a U.S. base outside of the country. Then you have the possibility that they go for some kind of asymmetrical cyber terrorism, or that they go with an economic option like trying to close the Strait of Hormuz. People I've been talking to in the region seem to feel that Iraq is the most vulnerable place by virtue of the fact that it's a weak state. You have a lot of paramilitary forces there. The State Department's evacuated roughly 500 U.S. personnel from there. But also the broader consensus is that Iran wants to try to pick a move right now that will show strength or project strength to particularly its own people, while not trying to risk further retaliation, possibly trying to minimize casualties, because Iran has been significantly weakened, as we've all been talking about and watching.
There are so many questions right now about Iran's capabilities, right? I mean, this siren that's just coming in now, it's been 20 hours since the last Iranian attack. We saw that barrage just after 7:30 this morning. We know that they still do have ballistic missile capabilities, despite having destroyed about half of their launchers, according to the Israeli military. And so we'll see, you know, what more firepower they have for here, but also critically, of course, for those U.S. bases in the region, which will be easier for the Iranians to target.
All right, I think we're going to head down to the shelters. Chuck, do we have capabilities as we go down?
Just checking your microphones. Be ready in a second. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see if we can switch over. So is this actually working?
You guys hear him?
Okay. I'm not. Oh, get here.
What's your microphone?
Okay, I think it's.
Bring your IFB box. Bring your IFB box. Just unplug it.
Should we all go?
Yeah, I think we should all get one. So again, you can hear the sirens going off. This is from the hotel. They're warning all the hotel guests to go down. This is the first time today that we have had an alarm like this. It's obviously something that many here in Tel Aviv have gotten used to over the last 10 or 11 days since this began. We saw there was one alarm shortly after, or several hours after the first strike, the strikes on Iran by the United States. This is the first one we've had this morning. Okay. So I'm just going to go down here. Sorry. And here with Jeremy Diamond. So in terms of this is the first one today, isn't it?
It's the first one, not today, because 7 in the morning was the last one. I think we're all a little bit upside down.
3 a.m. now.
Oh, we're at 3 a.m. Yes, so it is the first one of the day. But what we've noticed, I think, is fewer barrages, but quite high intensity, particularly this morning. I mean, Jeremy, you were there on the scene. The damage was...
Yeah, I mean, there's also been reports that the Iranians have been using different types of ballistic missiles, some reports of cluster munition use as well, and we've seen the kind of impact that can have on the scene. Today I was at a site in the north of Tel Aviv, in Ramat Aviv, where you saw a residential block that was almost, completely obliterated by the power of that blast.
You guys got to press down in the basement, please.
The damage is enormous. More of these ballistic missiles that are indeed getting through those air defense systems. But, quite incredibly, we haven't seen any fatalities in, I believe, a week now, right? The last Monday morning was the last time we saw a fatality. That's, of course, a credit to the aerial defense systems, but more importantly, perhaps, to the early warnings that are getting us into bomb shelters and getting millions of other Israelis
Yeah, and I'm going to take over here from the White House. Kristen Holmes, with senior White House correspondent, as they go into that shelter. We are losing service there, but we expect to get them back at any moment. Of course, hoping that they are safe as this is continuing. Now, I think we have our signal back. Okay, great.
It is a luxury to have a 10-minute warning. Obviously, in a situation like this, in many cases, obviously, rockets from Gaza. Generally, there isn't that like a 10-minute window.
No, but it's a different level of threat, right? I mean, Israelis have been living with rockets from Hamas and Hezbollah for many years. I have never seen Israelis running to the shelter quite so quickly as they have with this, because it's a totally different ballgame. The damage and destruction that has been, been done by these Iranian ballistic missiles is completely different to anything they've seen in many decades. I mean,
and there's no question that without those warning sirens, without the bomb shelters, I mean, you would be seeing, many people dying in each one of these strikes. And the fact that the death toll is only 24 as of now in Israel is indeed a credit to all those systems that we've been talking about.
So we are awaiting what will be the red alert, which is the final minute and a half warning before any kind of an impact. I don't have communication with so I can't actually go to anybody else. So we're stuck talking with each other. That's okay.
We'll muddle through it.
In terms of Iranian response, there's been a lot of questions about what is going to happen now. What will the Iranian response be? Obviously, these missiles are one form of response, but what we don't know yet, or what decision has been made by Iranian leaders, who's going to be making that decision? Is it utilizing proxy forces, militias in Iraq, or what have you?
And Iran's foreign minister said today, basically, that it won't be the government who's making that decision, it will be the military that will make that decision. And they have a lot of different tools that they can draw upon, whether it's proxy forces, whether they go asymmetrical with a terror attack, for example, or kidnapping, or some kind of a cyber attack. But again, I mean, I mentioned it upstairs, but in the melee, I think it's worth reiterating this idea that, you know, there's a concern for Iran right now, right? They are hurting. They have incurred a lot of damage. They want to try to find some kind of a retaliation that potentially restores deterrent or at least projects some image of strength, particularly for Iranians. But what they don't want to do is do something that is so escalatory that it risks, and we've heard President Trump said, listen, we're going to draw a line under this if you take it on the chin, but if you keep going, you have a choice between, I believe he said, peace or tragedy. So I think for Iran, it's like that question of trying to find, oh no, we can hear the sirens now.
The sirens right now.
So that indicates 90 seconds roughly until...
Just listen.
Red alert. Red alert.
So this is the minute and a half or so warning.
And right now we're getting sirens all across the central part of Israel. This includes Tel Aviv and the surrounding suburbs. You have Petah Tikva, Ramat Gan, Rishon LeZion, Bat Yam. Those are some of the areas that have been hit over the course.
There's an app, Homefront Command here, what's called Homefront Command actually has an app that people can see. Is this a nationwide alert? Is this just in Tel Aviv, or where is it?
That's right. And you know, we have seen moments where the Iranians choose to fire missiles at the kind of major population centers, right? Haifa has been a big target in northern Israel. That is, of course, a strategic site as well, because there is a port, there's a naval base there, commercial shipping, all of that. Of course, we have seen these missiles very often striking residential areas, missing the port as it did the other day, for example. Then we've seen hits, of course, here in Tel Aviv and the surrounding area as well. There are several military bases, we should note, in the area additionally. And then in Beersheva, in the southern part of Israel, we saw that hospital, of course, in the last week, Soroka Medical Center, which was hit by an Iranian missile. And I also think that's one thing that's important to note. The destructive power of these missiles is enormous, and we've also seen so is their inability to pinpoint target what they are actually going after. That would be acknowledging that they are not trying to intentionally hit residential areas, which, you know, we don't have total visibility into that. But certainly we know that their missiles are not as accurate as they had initially claimed, and that has been proven over the course of these various strikes in the last week.
By the way, I can hear the programming, so control room, if you guys could talk to me, if we could also bring in some of our other guests that we had planned to talk to. We had Kristen Holmes of the White House and others, so let's please somebody talk to my ear. Let me know when we can do that.
I think it's also important, just in line with what Jeremy was saying, to acknowledge that we're not really aware of all of the targets here, right? I mean, we go out, we see the targets that fall in residential areas. We can assume that there are some military targets that the Iranians have managed to hit as well, but understandably there is censorship around that. We don't necessarily find out about it or hear about it. And so it's very difficult. For example, with Soroka Hospital, strike on a hospital, 5th floor, the urology department. The Iranians said that they were hitting some kind of an intelligence military command center nearby, and that the damage to the hospital was simply a secondary effect of the blast. Very difficult for us as reporters, without full visibility on everything going on, to know whether that is, you know, indeed the case, or whether the actual target was the hospital, or
Absolutely.
whether the target was something totally different and it just missed.
And we also know that in those previous Iranian ballistic missile barrages that preceded this current conflict in last year, we know that there were a lot of videos of strikes on the Netzarim air base, for example, in southern Israel. You saw multiple impacts to those bases.
I think we have Kristen Holmes at the White House. I do want to go to Kristen. Kristen, I'm not sure I'll be able to hear you you, but just talk about what we have heard from the administration today. J.D. Vance and others were out saying that regime change is not what the U.S. policy is. President Trump sent out that social media post late this afternoon talking about or mentioning in a light way about regime change. Kristen?
Yeah, Anderson, that's right. And one of the things to point out here, I mean, this moment that you guys are going through in Tel Aviv is something that the White House is watching very carefully. They are very concerned across the administration of any kind of retaliation from Iran. We have heard a number of officials out there, one using kind of language saying, if you come back at us or any of our allies in any kind of way, that we're going to come back with even more strength than what you saw in the strikes from last night. We've also heard economic threats. Essentially, we saw Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, as well as Vice President J.D. Vance, saying that it was suicide for Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz because it would kill them economically, as well as China, as well as the United States. But there's a lot of messaging going on about what retaliation looks like, and you can kind of read through the tea leaves where they think that retaliation might be. Now, when it comes to a regime change, as you just mentioned, I mean, this happened even before these strikes. We've been asking the Trump administration over and over again, do you support a regime change in Iran? And that question has been shrugged off a number of times, including on Thursday when Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt was asked that question, and she said that's not the focus right now. The focus is on making sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Then you heard Vice President J.D. Vance get out there today, as well as the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, saying this is not about regime change. Well, all of that seems to have changed this evening, and I'm looking for it right now to pull it up, when Trump posted on social media that he was maybe okay with a regime change. This is what he said. He said it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? And then added MIGA, which a play on Make America Great Again, Make Iran Great Again. This is a surprise to a number of officials who have tried to downplay what we were told by other officials and Israeli officials was kind of a goal, if not a direct goal, but an indirect goal of the Israeli portion of the conflict with Iran was to get a regime change. We've heard the U.S. downplay that, and now you have President Trump getting out there on social media and saying this. And just a quick note, Anderson, you know, we talked a lot last night about all of the steps that went into this decision that President Trump made. And I do want to bring up that we now have a whole picture of how this happened, and just the idea that really these talks about the United States joining Israel to attack Iran began early in the month, June 8th, when President Trump went to a last-minute retreat at Camp David with his national security team. Last minute to us, we were told about it right before he went. And then we were told at that point he was briefed on these possible plans that had been drawn up for months. And it took some time to get President Trump there. He continued to ask questions about, as we know, could we get in and get out, destroy these nuclear sites, and then get out as fast as possible? Also, does our involvement mean that we get tied up in a conflict long term in the Middle East? So right now, obviously, though, none of that is not really on their minds. What's on their minds is what is the retaliation from Iran going to look like? Anderson?
Yeah, Kristen, thanks very much. Appreciate that. I want to bring in Barak Ravid from Axios and CNN. Barak, you've had some extraordinary reporting today about what was happening behind the scenes. What have you learned in the lead up to this attack?
Hi, Anderson. I hope you're safe over there. One of the interesting things I learned is that in the 24 to 48 hours before the U.S. strike in Iran, there was a quite extraordinary, maybe unprecedented cooperation, military cooperation between Israel and the U.S. when President Trump was talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think it was on Wednesday, and basically told him that he made a decision in principle to go in and join this war. And Netanyahu asked, okay, how can I help? And one of the things Trump asked him is for Israeli help to clear the way for the B-2 bombers to strike Iranian air defense systems that were still in southern Iran and that were on the way to the nuclear facility in Fordo. And the U.S. gave Israel a list of those targets. And in the 24 hours ahead of the U.S. strike, the Israeli Air Force went in and conducted strikes against those targets, basically opening the way and clearing it to the B-2 bombers. And this is why, by the way, you heard President Trump in his speech thanking the IDF for everything they've done.
Barak, what are you hearing about bomb damage assessments? What is Israel or the U.S.'s belief about the extent of the damage? Obviously, President Trump, shortly after the attack, when he spoke to the nation, said it's been obliterated. Do we know more details?
Well, to be honest, I don't think we know a lot because last I heard a few hours ago, those what's called the battle damage assessment has still been ongoing. But what I heard from one senior Israeli official was that the nuclear facility in Natanz, both the one above the ground that Israel conducted strikes against and the underground facility that the U.S. conducted the strike against, was basically destroyed completely. There are two other facilities, one in Isfahan and one in Fordo, the fortified facility inside the mountain. Both of those, according to this senior Israeli official, were badly damaged. What is badly damaged? I think we'll need to figure that out and see in the next hours or days.
For you, what are the biggest unanswered questions that you are looking for answers on?
I think, first and foremost, where is the enriched uranium? There are 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, very close to weapons grade. Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked about it today, and he said that Israel has interesting intelligence about where this material is. There's other material of 20% enriched uranium, also hundreds of kilograms. That's, I think, the main challenge at the moment, because even though the uranium program has suffered a huge blow, still this material could be a basis for a new and rehabilitated nuclear program. And the question is, where is it? And I don't think a lot of people know, if any.
Barak, if you could just stay with us for 1 second, have you gotten any more information about this?
Yeah, I have a quick update on this latest barrage. Was in fact just one missile, according to an Israeli official that I just spoke with. This is the initial assessment of the Israeli military. It can change later on, but as of now, our understanding is that people across the central Israel, Tel Aviv area were sent into shelters because of one missile fired by Iran that was intercepted by the Israeli military at this stage.
So do we have the all clear? Can we go back up yet?
We don't yet have the all clear. Okay. Officially, at least. We'll be waiting for that from the home front command. I can't personally give you that.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a short break. Well, actually, let's check in with Natasha. Barak Ravid, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate your remarkable reporting, as always. Let's check in with Natasha Bertrand. Natasha, what are you hearing?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, this military operation was obviously a really big deception operation that the U.S. military carried out in really a lot of secrecy, and something that is frankly pretty surprising these days from the U.S. military. Having covered the Pentagon for a couple years now, I can tell you that usually we get some kind of heads up that something is going on, but over the last couple days or so, it had been total silence. And not only that, but also there was obviously this deception operation where you saw those B-2 bombers heading out west over the Pacific, while getting everyone to kind of look that way, while at the same time, additional B-2 bombers were actually headed east toward the target in Iran that were not visible and not audible on air traffic control audio. And so there was clearly a lot of moving parts to this operation. And the question now, of course, is, given the scale of this, given the fact that over 125 aircraft were involved, these massive ordnance penetrators, these bunker buster bombs were involved, so much went into this operation to try to degrade these 3 nuclear facilities. What kind of impact did that actually have? And we've gotten a few conflicting answers at this point from the Secretary of Defense, from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and of course from President Trump himself. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have said, look, all of these nuclear facilities were obliterated. Their nuclear program was devastated. But General Dan Keynes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was much more measured earlier today. And he said, look, it is still going to take some time until we know for sure just how much this operation degraded their nuclear capabilities. And we do not yet have a reliable battle damage assessment. And that is going to come in the coming days. And so I think one of the things, obviously, that the Pentagon is going to be looking at very closely here is just how much those massive bombs were able to penetrate deep enough to destroy that enriched uranium at these two sites. Now, notably, we also have new reporting that the U.S. bombers, they didn't actually bomb every single nuclear facility. They actually left one to be attacked by Tomahawk missiles using U.S. submarines. And there are a lot of questions about why they did that. It is still unclear why they wouldn't use those bunker busters against such a heavily fortified facility such as Esfahan, which is in central Iran. It was one of the most sprawling, biggest nuclear facilities that Iran has. We're still trying to get the answer to that, but experts say that because the U.S. didn't drop these massive bunker busters and because more than 60% of Iran's enriched material lies at that facility, there are still very serious questions here about just how intact Iran's nuclear program remains. Not to mention the fact that the IAEA director just said recently that he believes that Iran managed to smuggle some of its enriched uranium out of the Fordo facility just before the U.S. carried out these strikes. So a lot of questions still about just how impactful this operation was. But, you know, by and large, the administration is saying that they believe, at least for now, they managed to degrade this enough to hopefully get Iran to come to the table and get back into diplomatic talks. Anderson.
Thanks very much, Natasha. We're going to take a short break. We just got the all clear. We're going to try to get back to her location. We'll be right back after this.